Before this video starts, I just want to give a massive shout out to all my channel members. If you want to receive a shout out, then become a channel member today and you'll be shown on screen like all these other channel members here. Anyways, enjoy the video. Yearly celebrations around the world are held all across the year. Some of them are to celebrate a person or event, some to celebrate a holiday, or others to celebrate the start or end of an ongoing event. Many games celebrate different holidays and events that happen all around the world, whether it be Team Fortress 2's Scream Fortress for Halloween or Fortnite's Winterfest to celebrate Christmas. These events usually come with limited time items to match that season they're celebrating, and the Battle Cats is no different. The seasonal Ubers are variants of existing Ubers that come around during certain holidays. In this video, I go over every single seasonal Uber as of version 12.5 and will be comparing them to their non-seasonal counterparts. I'm going to be going in order of which seasonal event occurs from the start of the year to the end of the year. This means I will be covering the Valentine's, White Day, Easter, June Bride, Summer, Halloween, and Christmas Ubers in that order. All of the stats mentioned are their level 30 stats with max treasures, and since none of the seasonal Ubers have talents, they won't be brought up, though with one exception, but we will cover that when we get there. This video also only discusses the difference between the variants, so if they share a stat or share an ability, it won't be mentioned, like the Kai variants having resist. If you enjoyed this lengthy analysis of comparing Ubers with each other, then give this video a like, and if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel as this lets me know that this is the sort of content you guys enjoy. Also, leave a comment down below as to which seasonal Uber is your favorite. Anyways, let's compare some Ubers. For the first seasonal event, we have the Valentine's Ubers, and for our first Valentine's Uber, we have Chocolatity. She is a variant of Mega Aphrodite from the Almighties. Chocolatity deals massive damage to red and black enemies, while Aphrodite deals massive damage to aliens. Chocolatity deals 34,000 damage, or 130,000 damage to her targets, while Mega Aphrodite deals 40,800 damage, or 163,200 damage to aliens. This means that Chocolatity only deals 83% of the damage base Aphrodite does. Chocolatity has 2,841 DPS or 11,364 DPS against her targets, whereas Mega Aphrodite has 3,409 DPS or 13,637 DPS against aliens. The last difference is that Chocolatity has a standing range of 550 range, whereas Mega Aphrodite has a standing range of 600. For general use, Mega Aphrodite is the better of the two, but Chocolatity is still a fine sniper unit to use. The enemy that is most affected by Chocolatity is Professor A due to being outranged and sniped by Chocolatity. She can also be used to help snipe other backliners like Lenoir and Director Kurosawa if you have a stepping stone. Next is First Love Mercia, the Valentine variant of Mercia from the Xmas Gals. First Love Mercia has a 30% chance to dodge red and floating enemies for 2.4 seconds, whereas regular Mercia has the same dodge chance against Traitless for 2 seconds. First Love Mercia has 68,000 health, whereas regular Mercia has 40,800 health. This means First Love Mercia has 67% more health compared to a regular version. The last difference is their wave level on the second hit. First Love Mercia has a level 3 wave and regular Mercia has a level 2 wave. First Love Mercia's higher wave level, health, and additional targets allow her to be used in a more generalist sense, but she still should not be used as your main attacker, and her somewhat inconsistent dodge shouldn't be your main line of defense. The last Valentine Gal variant is Sweet Love Makako, a variant of Makako Sayonji from the Dark Heroes, and like all Dark Heroes, each form does something different. Sweet Love Makako has a 50% chance to freeze traitless enemies for 4 seconds, whereas Makako Sayonji resists black and alien enemies with a 100% chance to survive a lethal strike. Since Makako Sayonji has the resist ability, her health is at 485,000 against her targets versus the base health of 96,900 for Sweet Love Makako. Sweet Love Makako's role is different from her regular counterpart, but due to her being an anti-traitless unit, it gives her a much larger niche, especially for early to mid game, where anti-traitless units are hard to come by. For the second form, we have Bittersweet Makako and Dr. Makako. Whereas Bittersweet Makako has a 50% chance to freeze black enemies for 4.4 seconds, Dr. Makako has a 50% chance to knock back and weaken aliens for 10 seconds. Bittersweet Makako is somewhat harder to slot into your lineup compared to her first form, since freezing black enemies can be done by a bunch of other units, and in some situations, you can easily just brute force them. However, if you lack options, she still does a good job at what she does. Lastly is Minty Love Makako and Mission Control Makako. Just like the other forms, Minty Love Makako has a 50% chance to freeze relic enemies for 4 seconds, but with an addition to an immunity to curse. Mission Control Mikako, on the other hand, deals massive damage against alien enemies, dealing 136,000 damage to aliens and has a 100% chance to slow them for 6 seconds. As an anti-relic crowd control unit, Minty Love Mikako can be super useful against the majority of the threats in Uncanny Legends. She's also one of the few uber relic crowd controllers that don't require talents to unlock their relic targeting, making her not only resource safe, but also extremely helpful for a lot of early Uncanny Legends progression. Later on, her usage does fall off a tiny bit just because of how many anti-relic units you unlock while going through Uncanny Legends, but she still does a good job at freezing her targets. For the first two White Day Ubers, we have Love-Struck Greater Demon and Greater Demon Cat from the Dynamites. Love-Struck Greater Demon has 66,300 health, whereas Greater Demon Cat has 49,300 health. This means that Love-Struck Greater Demon has 34% more health than Greater Demon Cat. Love-Struck Greater Demon also has a 30% chance to inflict knockback, as well as any of the following statuses for 2.5 seconds or 3 seconds against treasure traits. They can freeze, slow, and or weaken. Greater Demon Cat has weaken immune. This unit tries to do something different compared to its original counterpart, being a statuser, but it doesn't really work since a unit with this build can really only work if they have tons of health, but it could work as a general debuffer during the early to mid game, but falls off hard later on. Little detail, but Love-Struck Greater Demon also has the same health as Balrog Cat, but lacks all of the offensive capabilities of it. Next up is White Butler Vigler, a variant of Detective Vigler from the Dark Heroes. The only differences are their targets and abilities. Detective Vigler targets floating and aliens, whereas White Butler Vigler targets Red and Aku, but also has the added effects of a 50% chance to pierce an Aku shield and has surge immunity for his Aku matchup. White Butler Vigler's main issue is his Lawn Force Swing, a trait shared by his regular counterpart, but if he can keep the defense up, then the hit will usually be worth it. Being the Dark Hero variant that he is, the second form also has some differences. While Black Butler Vigler keeps their Aku targeting with the same shield pierce and surge immunity, they now target black enemies instead of red. Inspector Gabriel replaces his floating target for a zombie target and gains Z-Killer. Same issues with the Lawn Force Swing, but the hit is usually worth it if you can keep up the defense. Now for what effectively feels like two different units just because of how many differences there are, we have Spring Breeze Kenshin, the first Easter variant of the video and a variant of Immortal Kenshin of the War God set. First off, Spring Breeze Kenshin targets angels, but they also have Colossus Slayer and are immune to weaken, whereas Immortal Kenshin targets black enemies. Spring Breeze Kenshin only has 81% of the base health of Immortal Kenshin, but deals 6% more damage. She deals 29,275 base damage, 52,695 damage against angels, 46,840 damage against Colossus enemies, and 84,312 damage against Angel Colossus enemies. On the more simple side, Immortal Kenshin deals 27,575 damage while dealing 49,635 damage against black enemies. For the health comparison, Spring Breeze Kenshin has 61,540 health, whereas Immortal Kenshin has 75,820 health. Against angels, Spring Breeze Kenshin has 153,850 health against angels, 97,914 against Colossus enemies, and 219,785 health against Angel Colossus enemies. Immortal Kenshin has 189,550 health against black enemies. In terms of DPS, Immortal Kenshin has 6,412 DPS, 11,543 DPS against black enemies. Spring Breeze Kenshin has 6,056 DPS, 10,902 DPS against angels, 9,691 DPS against Colossus enemies, and 17,443 DPS against Angel Colossus enemies. Spring Breeze Kenshin has a TBA of 3.67 seconds, while Immortal Kenshin has a TBA of 3.13 seconds. Lastly, Immortal Kenshin has 405 range with 18 speed, and Spring Breeze Kenshin has 410 range with 13 speed. Spring Breeze Kenshin is a pretty good anti-angel attacker and a great unit for Archangel Excel's Gauntlet and Chibanel. Her weaken immunity also allows her to be an amazing unit to use against Winged Piggy, who is famous for being one of the most difficult enemies for most people to fight. Her knockback ability is usually activated more often than her regular counterpart, since angels tend to have more health than their black counterparts, making them take longer to get knocked back. Now for a unit that has more simple changes, this being Bunny and Canard, the Easter variant of Warlock and Pierre. Bunny and Canard have 9.6% more health than the health of Warlock and Pierre, as Bunny and Canard has 115,600 health and Warlock and Pierre has 105,400 health. Bunny and Canard target red and black enemies only, while Warlock and Pierre targets alien and floating only. Bunny and Canard are immune to freeze and slow, while Warlock and Pierre is unique for being the only unit with the base destroyer ability. Lastly, Bunny and Canard cost 5,910 cents to send out, while Warlock and Pierre cost 6,135 cents. Like their regular counterpart, they excel when fighting against red and black enemies thanks to their sheer damage output, though their immunities are a bit odd since most red and black enemies usually tend to rely on brute force over status effects, but against enemies like Professor A and Baku, it makes them much easier to fight with their immunities. Next is Disciple Psychoduck and Dark Merchant Babel. They have the same health and cost as their last forms, but now Disciple Psychoduck targets red and zombies with Zombie Killer, and Dark Merchant Babel targets alien and angels while also having the double bounty ability. Disciple Psychoduck, like every other version of Warlock and Pierre, is an amazing unit for dealing with their targets. Psychoduck's high health means they can take a hit or two from an unburrowing zombie and take a huge chunk of their health away, if not straight up kill the enemy. This unit, if obtained early enough into a player's save, can make a lot of outbreak stages much easier to beat. Lastly is Malevolent Mad Duck and Mad Dr. Clay. While Malevolent Mad Duck keeps the same stats, Mad Dr. Clay gets a massive stat boost to both his health and attack. Mad Dr. Clay deals 50% more damage and has 36% more health than Malevolent Mad Duck, but whereas Malevolent Mad Duck keeps two traits, these being Red and Aku, Mad Dr. Clay only gets to target alien. Malevolent Mad Duck also gains Toxic and Surge immunity, while Mad Dr. Clay gains Knockback, Freeze, Slow, and Weaken immunities. While their Toxic immunity has almost no usage since no red enemies can inflict Toxic, and the only Aku enemies that can inflict Toxic are Mammon, whose Toxic isn't very threatening, and Infernal Tyrant Yandam, and where Malevolent Mad Duck stands in his blind spot, the Surge immunity is actually quite handy for both traits. While Red Energy and Renard are the only red enemies who can surge, they both have some very annoying surges, especially Red Energy. Malevolent Mad Duck can easily stay safe from Red Energy's surge and deal tons of damage back. Aku enemies have tons of surges and death surges. Death surge spam is something you'll find be used in quite a few levels, so being immune to it is great. One last example of the surge immune being great is against the Omens. While they don't outrange the Omens themselves, as they both share 430 range, the surge immunity allows them to land easy hits against the Midnight D, who is one of the harder enemies to take down, alongside with chipping down Johnny Leon. Everbloom Lord Kamakura is the Easter variant of God Emperor Kamakura from the Dragon Emperors. Everbloom Lord Kamakura has 90% of the health of the original Kamakura. Everbloom Lord Kamakura has 76,500 health, while God Emperor Kamakura has 85,000 health. Everbloom Lord Kamakura also has 460 range, while God Emperor Kamakura has 475 range. Everbloom Lord Kamakura has an attack frequency of 8.73 seconds, making their DPS 4,835, while God Emperor Kamakura's attack frequency is 8.1 seconds, giving them 5,213 DPS. While Everbloom Lord Kamakura targets metal and aqua enemies while also being wave immune, God Emperor Kamakura only targets red enemies with no unique abilities compared to Everbloom Lord Kamakura. Everbloom Lord Kamakura is a decent wave immune attacker and is good for crowd controlling metals, especially Coronium, but against Akus, it's somewhat of a different story. They work well enough against unshielded Akus, but against Akus with shields, they're very tricky to use, especially against his main targets, who are Akus with wave and mini wave, as all of them have shields. Death Quarry, Wicked Face, and Possessed Empress are the main targets Kamakura wants to target, but you're gonna need a shield piercer if you want to be able to use them effectively. Rabbit Champion Sataru is the last Easter Uber and is a variant of Dark Summoner Sataru. Rabbit Champion Sataru has 7% more health, having 39,100 health compared to his regular version's 36,550 health, and deals 12% more damage compared to his regular counterpart, dealing 31,620 damage compared to Summoner Sataru's 28,200 damage. Rabbit Champion Sataru targets traitless enemies and is wave immune, whereas Dark Summoner Sataru targets Aku and has a 20% chance to pierce Aku's shields, along with being immune to surge attacks. Being a dedicated anti-traitless unit, their niche is very valuable, especially if you lack other options. Since they're also wave immune, they could be an amazing support unit against enemies like Manic Macho Legs, Manic Jamera, Mr. Mur, Cory, and Hermit Cat, though they do struggle a lot against enemies with LD or aggressive units like Boar Jr. 57% uptime for the slow isn't the best thing in the world, but can be useful if you lack options for traitless crowd control. Wedding Chronos is one of the two June Bride Ubers and is a variant of Chronos the Infinite. Wedding Chronos has 51,000 health compared to Chronos the Infinite's 45,900 health, giving Wedding Chronos 11% more health. Wedding Chronos had her abilities change from a 100% chance to freeze for 1 second or 1.2 second against treasure traits to a 50% chance to slow, weaken, and or curse for 1.5 or 1.8 seconds against treasure traits. Wedding Chronos also has a 20% chance to mini-wave. This ends up giving her a slight boost to her DPS, going from 3,449 DPS to 3,733 DPS. Wedding Chronos, I would say, is Love-Struck Greater Demon done right. Since she has actual range plus area attack, Chronos can more reliably land her status effects against her foes. While her curse is somewhat situational, it can be useful against certain enemy types like aliens and zombies. Her weaken and slow can also come in handy, and her mini wave has a chance to halt the progression of an enemy that gets too close or is super far back, but the 20% activation chance means it isn't something you should fully rely on. The second Uber is Betrothed Pastalan, who is a variant of Balalan Pastalan from the Nekulugas. There are a few differences. The biggest one is the attack stat. Betrothed Pastalan can deal up to 32,385 damage, 10,795 damage per hit from the multi-hit, where the range is split between -310 to 540, -635 to 590, and -960 to 640 range. Their standing range is 640. They freeze for 1.67 seconds or 2 seconds against treasure traits, but this freeze only applies on the third hit. This also makes their DPS 3,249. For Balalan Pasalan, they deal 187 damage with a mind-boggling 11 DPS. They freeze for 2.33 seconds or 2.8 seconds against treasured enemies. They also have a standing range of 940. Betrothed Pasalan also has a TBA of 6.67 seconds, giving them an attack frequency of 9.97 seconds, while Balalan Pasalan has a TBA of 13.3 seconds, meaning their attack frequency is 16.43 seconds. Betrothed Pasalan's freeze lasts only 71% the time Balalan's freeze time does. This unit is very wonky due to the multi-hit they possess, making their damage cut off randomly because they knock back an enemy. Their freeze also only being on the last hit also doesn't make them that reliable of a crowd controller because of the previous issues mentioned. Now for the first of many summer gals, we have Tropical Kalisa. Tropical Kalisa is a variant of Kalisa from the Galaxy Gals. There are a few differences, mainly their damage on targets. Tropical Kalisa has 34,000 damage or 136,000 damage against red enemies. Regular Kalisa deals 30,600 damage and deals 122,400 damage against angel enemies. This means that Tropical Kalisa has 6,754 DPS or 27,019 DPS against red enemies, and regular Kalisa has 6,079 DPS with 24,317 DPS against angel enemies. The only other difference is a slight cost difference. Tropical Kalisa costs 3,900 to send out, while base Kalisa costs 4,125 to send out. Also, Tropical Kalisa has a shorter force swing of 1.23 seconds, but a longer backswing of 3.8 seconds. Regular Kalisa has a force swing of 1.33 seconds, but a shorter backswing of 3.7 seconds. While this doesn't change anything about how you use these units, it's still an interesting decision that they changed their force swing and backswing like this. Tropical Kalisa, being a rusher unit against red enemies, is a massive strength of hers, as she will be able to outrange most red enemies and secure some massive damage against them. Also, her high speed allows her to have a use in stages like Realm of Carnage, in which she could easily secure a hit against Hanya, dropping almost 15% of her health in one hit. Her rebound can also be used to secure more hits, as her TBA is non-existent. A great rusher unit like her regular counterpart, and since most red enemies lack tons of range, she is given more range to deal tons of damage. Midsummer Rabbit is the variant of the White Rabbit from the Dark Heroes. Midsummer Rabbit targets black and angel enemies, whereas the White Rabbit targets red and aliens. However, the Midsummer Rabbit deals 38,760 damage, whereas the White Rabbit deals 33,600 damage. This means that the Midsummer Rabbit deals 15% more damage and has 4,123 DPS, while the White Rabbit has 3,580 DPS. Also, the White Rabbit costs 5,325 to send out, while the Midsummer Rabbit costs 4,950. Unlike the White Rabbit, Midsummer Rabbit's slow can have a much bigger impact since black and angel enemies tend to be extremely aggressive when it comes to their pushing power. However, her uptime still isn't the best, only having an uptime of 59%, meaning she works best as additional crowd control support. The targets, cost, and base damage all stay the same. The only change for the Midsummer Rabbit and Midsummer Cat is the ability they have. This changes from a 5.6 second slow to the strong ability. This means that the Midsummer Cat deals 69,768 damage against their targets with 7,422 DPS, while the Black Cat deals 60,588 damage against their targets with 6,445 DPS. Thanks to her higher base stats, she'll be able to deal more damage to her targets compared to the Black Cat. Her high knockback count allows her to continuously reposition to a safer spot, especially thanks to her 465 range. While she may not be the best, she still gets the job done when it comes to leaving her mark. Seashore Kai is one of the two seasonal variants of Kai from the Galaxy Gals. Seashore Kai resists Black and Zombie compared to Base Kai, who resists floating. Seashore Kai also has Z-Killer, while Base Kai has a 100% chance to survive a lethal strike. Seashore Kai deals 42,415 damage compared to Base Kai, who deals 84,830 damage. This means Seashore Kai only deals half the damage Base Kai does. However, because of Base Kai's animations being much longer compared to Seashore Kai's, Seashore Kai has about the same DPS as Base Kai. Seashore Kai has 8,053 DPS compared to Base Kai's 8,079 DPS. Seashore Kai has a force swing of 1.7 seconds, a backswing of 1 second, and a TBA of 3.6 seconds. This gives her an attack frequency of 5.27 seconds. Base Kai has a force swing of 2.53 seconds, a backswing of 2.5 seconds, and a TBA of 8 seconds. This gives her an attack frequency of 10.5 seconds. Due to the nature of black enemies being generally aggressive, tanking them is rather difficult unless you have a very high base health, like King Gamarion, so she won't be tanking them for long periods of time. Though against enemies like Nanoa and Director Kurosawa, she can tank them for a very long while. However, against zombies, she is an amazing tank against them. Since most zombie enemies aren't too aggressive, Seashore Kai is able to tank them for much longer periods of time. Zamel and Dabu of the Dead are her best showings, but she can struggle somewhat against enemies like Zori, Zangru, and Zerzeal. Though I would argue her worst matchup is against Lord Gravy, as her attack animation is too long to even hit Gravy thanks to their 100% knockback. An okay tank against black enemies, but a good one against zombies. Wave Rider Ku is the summer variant of Ku, also from the Galaxy Gals. Wave Rider Ku targets floating and zombie enemies with Zombie Killer, while Base Ku targets red and black enemies. Wave Rider Ku has 56,100 health, 140,250 health against her targets, while Base Ku has 39,100 health, 97,750 health against her targets. This means Wave Rider Ku's base health is 43% more health than Base Ku's. Wave Rider Ku deals 47,600 damage, 85,680 damage against her targets, while Base Ku deals 62,900 damage, 113,220 damage against her targets. This means Wave Rider Ku only deals 76% of the damage that Base Ku has. However, because of more attack frequency shenanigans, Wave Rider Ku has 24% more DPS. This comes down to how Wave Rider Ku has a TBA of 9 seconds, giving her an attack frequency of 10.97 seconds, while Base Ku has a TBA of 16 seconds, giving her an attack frequency of 17.97 seconds. Wave Rider Ku has 4,340 DPS, 7,812 DPS against her targets, while Base Ku has 3,500 DPS, 6,301 DPS against her targets. Also, Wave Rider Ku has 12 speed, while Base Ku has 13 speed. Wave Rider Ku has 400 range, while Base Ku has 380 range. Wave Rider Ku is able to tank more hits compared to her regular counterpart, and her faster attack rate allows her to land more hits against her targets. The biggest issue is that, like regular Ku, she has a somewhat long force swing. This can cause her to miss her attacks sometimes. Against zombies specifically, this could be an issue if a zombie is able to burrow, making them secure from her attacks. The best way to use her is against zombies that either don't burrow, like Lord Gravy, or difficult zombies after they have burrowed, like Cadaver Bear, as her 400 standing range can keep her safe if you properly meet shield. Her floating matchup is pretty good, as she can outrange most floating enemies. She is able to deal some nice damage to them as well, giving your units an easier time dealing with them. Sea Breeze Coppermine is a variant of Coppermine from, once again, the Galaxy Gals. Sea Breeze Coppermine targets red, black, and metal, while Base Coppermine targets floating. Sea Breeze Coppermine freeze lasts for 4.4 seconds, while Base Coppermine's freeze lasts for 5.6 seconds. Sea Breeze Coppermine has higher stats in multiple fields compared to her base form. She has 39,100 health compared to Base Coppermine's 33,320 health. She also deals 29,100 damage with 4,722 DPS versus base Copper Mine's 25,840 damage with 4,101 DPS. Seabreeze Copper Mine also has 375 range compared to base Copper Mine's 335 range. Seabreeze Copper Mine's freeze up time of 58% along with her 50% chance to freeze is really difficult to utilize since you can really expect to freeze every 12 seconds on average. Her best role is against metals thanks to the fact that most units aren't able to crowd control metal, especially those with a decent standing range. However, for her red and black matchup, you will probably have better options. Now for a seasonal variant with probably the smallest differences, we have Squirt Gun Saki, who is a seasonal variant of Sharpshooter Saki from the Dark Heroes. The only difference between these two is their targets. Squirt Gun Saki targets floating and black, while Sharpshooter Saki targets red and aliens. Her matchup against floating enemies is pretty great, but against black enemies, it may be somewhat more difficult to utilize, but if you have good crowd control, then she works well enough. Same thing is the case between Aqua Buster Saki and Night Hunter Saki. Aqua Buster Saki targets floating and angel, while Night Hunter Saki targets aliens and zombies. Night Hunter Saki also has Z-Kill to help her fight zombies. Aqua Buster Saki sorta has the same deal as her last form. Great against floating, but is more difficult to utilize against angels, but good crowd control makes her very good at her job. The only thing Aqua Blaster Saki gains upon true forming is the Strong ability, while Bad Blaster Saki targets aliens and relic while gaining curse immunity. This is the one time where I will bring up talents for this video. This is because Bad Blaster Saki got her strong talents in the first place because of her seasonal variant. This effectively times Saki's health by 2.5 times against aliens and 2 times against relics, plus 1.8 times damage against aliens and 1.5 times damage against relics. Her health against relics is 91,800 and her damage is equal to 102,000 and DPS is equal to 11,333. For Aqua Blaster Saki against her targets and Bad Blaster Saki against aliens, she has an effective 114,000 health and deals an effective 122,400 damage, and the DPS is equal to 13,600. For a Saki without the strong talent, these numbers are 45,900 health and 68,000 damage with 7,555 DPS. Aqua Blaster Saki still performs the same as her targets, but even more so thanks to her higher damage output and the ability to tank more hits in case things go south. Fabulous Passalan, the variant of Ultraland Passalan from the Nekalugas, takes on a whole new role as a surge unit. Fabulous Passalan has a level 8 surge, which spawns between 150 to 1050 range, whereas Ultraland Passalan has a 100% chance to knock back every trait outside of metal and freezes for 2 seconds, or 2.4 seconds against treasure traits. Fabulous Passalan has a base damage of 17,000, half of Ultraland Passalan, who deals 34,000 damage. However, if the surge does manage to hit an enemy, Fabulous Passalan deals 153,000 damage, which is 4.5 times the damage Ultraland Passalan does. This makes Fabulous Passalan's base DPS 897 or 8,073 if you can get consistent surge hits, while Ultraland Passalan has 1,795 DPS. If you love to gamble or love Mimi units, then this unit is for you. If you like consistent units that perform well, then you won't really want to use Fabulous Passalan all that much just because that surge is way too inconsistent. Kaguya of the Coast is a variant on Princess Kaguya from the Ultra Souls and is the only Ultra Souls seasonal variant. The only difference between the two forms are their targets. Kaguya of the Coast targets black and alien enemies, whereas Princess Kaguya targets metal and angel enemies. You would use Kaguya of the Coast the same way you would use Princess Kaguya, a spammable crowd control unit, just with different targets. The Southern Sunflare and the Chaos Moon, on the other hand, do have some differences between the two. The Southern Sunflare has 42,500 health and deals 45,900 damage with 4,971 DPS. This is only 89% of the Chaos Moon's health and 90% of the Chaos Moon's damage and DPS. The Chaos Moon has 47,600 health and deals 51,000 damage with 5,523 DPS. The Southern Sunflare does have the added target of Aku and has a 50% chance to pierce Aku shields. While the slow uptime isn't the best thing in the world, her good shield pierce chance of 50% allows you to easily begin stalling many Aku enemies. She works best when paired with another form of crowd controller to fully utilize her slow. Night Beach Lilin, like so many others in this set, is a variant of Lilin of the Galaxy Gals. Night Beach Lilin has 52,700 base health, which is 24% more than Lilin's base 42,500 health. She also deals 29,750 damage and has 4,772 DPS. This is 20% more than base Lilin, who deals 24,650 damage with 3,954 DPS. Night Beach Lilin is strong against alien and traitless enemies, giving her 131,750 health against aliens and 105,400 health against traitless. For damage, she deals 53,550 damage and has 8,590 DPS against aliens, while she deals 44,625 damage with 7,159 DPS against traitless enemies. Base Lilin targets Angel and Aku enemies. Against Angels, she has 106,250 health and deals 44,370 damage with 7,118 DPS. Against Aku, she has 85,000 health, deals 36,975 damage with 5,931 DPS. Night Beach Lilin also has a 100% chance to break alien barriers, is immune to warp, and has a 20% chance to dodge aliens for 2.4 seconds or 2 seconds against traitless enemies. For regular Lilin, the only different ability is that she has a 100% chance to break Aku Shield. Night Beach Lilin has a rather interesting set of abilities. Being an anti-traitless Uber with decent stats gives her a somewhat unique advantage compared to most Ubers, just simply due to the fact that there are almost no dedicated anti-traitless attackers. If you manage to get her before beating the Aku realms, then you have what is essentially a Gigando Light, since they share the same health, but due to Gigando's surge ability, his DPS and attack damage are a lot higher compared to Lilin's, but for the most part, she is still a pretty good anti-traitless attacker. Her anti-alien abilities are also okay. Being able to break barriers allows her to more easily attack aliens. Her warp immunity is a double-edged sword. While it allows her to land her hits more easily thanks to her somewhat long force swing, this denies her extra chances to reposition. Like with most dodge Ubers, it is best to treat it as a bonus more than anything. For the last summer variant and the newest seasonal variant as of the production of this video is Deep Diver Kana, a variant of Swashbuckler Kana from the Monster Gals set. Deep Diver Kana targets floating and alien enemies, while Swashbuckler Kana targets black enemies. The only true difference is their surge level. Deep Diver Kana has a level 1 surge level, while Swashbuckler Kana has a level 2 surge. This does mean that their damage is somewhat different. While their base damage is the same, their surge level gives Swashbuckler Kana an extra 6,460 damage compared to Deep Diver Kana. The total damage output of Deep Diver Kana can put out, including the surge, is 25,840 or 103,360 against floating and alien enemies, while Swashbuckler Kana can output 32,300 damage or 129,200 damage against black enemies. This also means that Deep Diver Kana has 3,445 DPS or 13,780 against floating and aliens, while Swashbuckler Kana has 4,306 DPS or 17,224 DPS against black enemies. Deep Diver Kana is still great at fighting alien and floating enemies. If you saw my 12.5 analysis video, you'll know that she can hit any floating and alien enemy thanks to her massive 1000 pierce except for Gardenale Bros, the Cat God, and the Filibuster Twins. She is super useful for sniping backliners like Spacefish Jones, Alpaki, Galactic Overseer Neandum, and Calamari. These enemies are notorious for being massive annoyances for the most part, so dealing with them like this makes these enemies much easier to deal with. Her damage output is still great for fighting mid-rangers as well, especially due to her surge spawns. Just like regular Kana, she works well at juggling these enemy types or dealing tons of damage to those with a lack of a high knockback count. Now that we're finally done with the summer Ubers, we can now cover the Halloween Ubers. The first one being Hallowindy, the Halloween variant of Windy from the Galaxy Gals. Instead of targeting floating enemies, Hallowindy targets aliens. Hallowindy has 38,250 health, which is 50% more than Windy Type A's 25,500 health. She has a base damage of 55,335 damage, dealing 221,340 damage against aliens, while Windy Type Alpha deals 43,435 damage, while dealing 173,740 damage against floating enemies. In terms of DPS, Hallowindy has 4,068 base DPS, and against aliens, this number goes to 16,275 DPS. For base Windy, she has 3,193 base DPS, translating to 12,775 DPS against floating enemies. Hallowindy also has 15 more range than base Windy. She has a range of 435 compared to Windy's 420 range. She also has 9 speed, which is faster than Windy's 6 speed. Hallowindy also has a slightly faster recharge, recharging every 97.87 seconds compared to base Windy's 102.27 second cooldown. Hallowindy still isn't great outside of her target, but her performance against aliens is pretty nice. Dealing 221,000 damage means she can nuke most aliens in 1 to 2 shots. She is reliable enough at her job to where she can get most things done, but she does fall off eventually. Spooky Thundia, another variant of a Galaxy Gals Uber, this being Thundia. Spooky Thundia has a new target, this being black compared to Thundia's red targeting. Spooky Thundia also has 38,250 health, 50% more than Thundia's 25,500 health. She also deals 55,335 damage or 221,340 damage to black enemies compared to base Thundia's 43,435 damage or 173,740 damage against red enemies. This gives Spooky Thundia 27% more damage than base Thundia. Spooky Thundia has 4,181 DPS or 16,725 DPS against black enemies compared to base Thundia's 3,282 base DPS or 13,128 DPS against red enemies. Spooky Thundia has a range of 425, 15 more than Thundia's 410 range. She also has a speed of 8, which is slightly faster than base Thundia's 5 speed. Lastly, Spooky Thundia has a 95.2 second cooldown, whereas base Thundia's cooldown is 106 seconds. Black enemies tend to be more difficult to hit for a unit like this than, say, red enemies due to their high knockback counts of most black enemies, so it's best to use her on those with a lack of knockbacks, such as Dark Otter, or those with a high health pool, like Bum Bum Black. If you don't have many other options, she still works fine, but she may miss her hit sometimes. For the first seasonal Uber to get a true form, we have Queen Succubus Cat. She is a variant of Ice Crystal Cat from the Dynamites. Compared to the last two variants, Queen Succubus doesn't have that many differences. Queen Succubus has a standing range of 385 compared to Ice Crystal's 425. She has a 75% chance to freeze angel enemies for 4.8 seconds or Akus for 4 seconds. Ice Crystal Cat, on the other hand, has a 100% chance to freeze red enemies for 4.8 seconds. With a cooldown of 57.87 seconds, you can reliably send her out into the battlefield and she will get some work done against angels and Akus. However, for her Aku matchup specifically, she needs to be supported with a shield piercer most of the time due to her low damage output and lack of shield pierce. Her lack of surge immunity also makes her vulnerable to death surges, though her fast cooldown doesn't make this as big of an issue compared to most anti-Aku Ubers who aren't surge immune, and a 75% freeze chance is reliable enough. She also performs pretty well against angels, even being able to outrange Sleipnir by 18 range and wing Piggy's Omni Strike by 35. Though since the uptime or freeze chance isn't 100%, they won't be stalled out forever, but if you get 2 onto the field, you will probably not struggle against these traits. Halloween Night Vars, which is my personal favorite seasonal design and one of my favorite designed units in this game, is a variant of God Emperor Vars of the Dragon Emperors. Halloween Night Vars has 61,200 health and God Emperor Vars has 76,500 health. Halloween Night Vars deals 23,765 damage, while God Emperor Vars deals 29,715 damage. Halloween Night Vars has 4,400 DPS, whereas God Emperor Vars has 5,502 DPS. This means that Halloween Night Vars has 80% the health, damage, and DPS compared to God Emperor Vars. Halloween Night Vars also has 445 range compared to God Emperor Vars' 460 range. Halloween Night Vars makes up for their slightly lower stats for more reliable crowd control compared to God Emperor Vars. While God Emperor Vars can only knock back black enemies at a 50% chance rate with a 50% chance to slow for 6 seconds, Halloween Night Vars not only has a 100% chance to knock back and slow for the same time, he also targets alien and zombie enemies along with having Z-Killer and a 50% chance to break barriers. Halloween Night Vars is able to permanently slow aliens and zombies due to having a guaranteed chance to slow, but do keep in mind that his knockback may prevent him from continuously slowing some enemies. His 50% barrier breaker can allow him to make quick work against most starred aliens, since they will be slowed and knocked back if Vars destroys the barrier. While their offensive stats aren't that high, their Z-Kill is nice to have when Vars does get that final hit. Vars also makes an enemy like Cadaver Bear much easier to manage due to Vars being able to perma-slow them, preventing strong aggressive pushes from this bear. The last of the Halloween Ubers is Nosferatu Yukimura, who is a variant of War God Yukimura of the War God set. Nosferatu trades his black targeting for floating. Nosferatu Yukimura also has a speed of 70 compared to War God Yukimura's 65. This gives Nosferatu the in-between speed of War God Yukimura and Immortal Yukimura. Nosferatu Yukimura also deals 35,055 damage or 140,220 damage against floating enemies, while War God Yukimura deals 28,050 damage or 112,200 damage against black enemies. In terms of DPS, this gives Nosferatu Yukimura 7,676 base DPS or 30,705 DPS against floating enemies, compared to War God Yukimura's 6,142 DPS or 24,569 DPS against black enemies. The biggest difference is that Nosferatu Yukimura has an ability War God Yukimura doesn't have, this being a 30% chance to survive a lethal strike. This could sometimes give him that one last chance to deal a devastating blow against his target. This unit, being an anti-floating rusher, also works as a third Bahamut due to him having a decent attack stat, along with a higher speed. The 30% survival chance is great, as it allows him to sometimes deal that one last hit against the foe. As an anti-floating unit, this unit is still pretty good, as their extremely high speed can usually allow them to secure a few points of massive damage. Floating enemies with LD, such as Queen Bee or Hazuku, are the best enemies for Yukimura, as they can easily slip into their blind spots and take tons of health off of them. The best way to use this unit is to treat it as a stronger but more expensive version of Fishman with area attack. Now for our last seasonal set, we have the Xmas Gals, and of course, starting us off is Frosty Kai, who as you can guess is the Christmas variant of Kai. Frosty Kai deals 42,415 damage, while base Kai deals 84,830 damage. This is still half of base Kai's damage, however, like with their summer variant, Frosty Kai has 8,053 DPS compared to Kai's 8,079 DPS. They also have the same animation time as their summer variant, as Frosty Kai has a force swing of 1.7 seconds, backswing of 1 second, and a TBA of 3.6 seconds. This gives her an attack frequency of 5.27 seconds. Base Kai has a force swing of 2.53 seconds, a backswing of 2.5 seconds, and a TBA of 8 seconds. Frosty Kai targets angel and alien enemies, however, unlike her summer variant, she actually has a lower base health as she only has 88,400 health compared to Kai's 96,900 health. Against her targets, Frosty Kai has 442,000 health, whereas base Kai has 484,500 health. This means that she only has 89% the health of base Kai. Unlike her summer variant, Frosty Kai doesn't have a unique ability like Kai's 100% chance to survive. Frosty Kai is a pretty alright tank against aliens and most angel enemies, and you can use her high health to pile up the enemies to let some units deal tons of damage to a whole group of enemies. However, due to her lower health stats, she does fall off the further you get into the game. Santa Ku is obviously a variant of Ku. She targets angels and aliens, while base Ku targets red and blacks. Santa Ku has 56,100 health, or 140,250 health against angels and aliens, while base Ku has 39,100 health, or 97,500 health against her targets. In terms of attack, Santa Ku deals 71,400 damage, or 128,520 damage against angels and aliens, while base Ku deals 62,900 damage, or 113,220 damage against her targets. In terms of DPS, Santa Ku has 4,292 DPS, or 7,726 DPS against her targets, while base Ku has 3,500 DPS, or 6,301 DPS against her targets. This is because while base Ku has a TBA of 16 seconds and an attack frequency of 17.97 seconds, Santa Ku has a TBA of 14.67 seconds while having an attack frequency of 16.63 DPS. This all means that Santa Ku's base health is 43% higher, deals 13% more damage, and has 22% more DPS compared to base Ku. Santa Ku also has a cooldown of 124.47 seconds compared to regular Ku's 131.2 DPS. Lastly, Santa Ku has 400 range, while base Ku has 380 range. Santa Ku is a bit of an iffy unit to use, especially nowadays to many other options being available. Unlike Wave Rider Ku, Santa Ku still has to deal with an extremely long TBA like her regular counterpart. While she can work against enemies like Sleipnir and many other mid-range aliens and angels, she does fall off quite a bit once you start getting further into the game, especially as you gain access to more options to help deal with angels and aliens. Perhaps she can gain a true form that helps her become a better unit for the late game, but as it stands, once you start running into aliens with warp or LD attacks, it's hard to use her. If you don't have any other options, however, she can still produce some major damage for a relatively safe distance. Holy Coppermine is a variant of Coppermine and targets angels and aliens instead of floating. She has 39,100 health compared to base Coppermine's 33,320 health. Holy Coppermine also deals 29,750 damage compared to base Coppermine's 25,840 damage. This translates to Holy Coppermine having 4,722 DPS compared to base Coppermine having 4,101 DPS. Holy Coppermine deals and has 15% more damage in DPS while having 17% more health. Holy Copper Mine also has a range of 375 compared to Copper Mine's 335 range, and recharges every 57.8 seconds compared to base Copper Mine's 65.87 second recharge. Holy Copper Mine suffers the same things that Sea Breeze Copper Mine does, but unlike Sea Breeze Copper Mine, she doesn't really have that special of a niche of having a rare targeting. Her freeze rate is still only 50%, though she can work somewhat if you're desperate for alien and angel freezers. Xmas Spirit Nurse is a variant of Joyful Nurse Cat from the Dynamites. Xmas Spirit Nurse has 3 targets for her knockback and slow, these being Angel, Alien, and Aku compared to Joyful Nurse's floating and black targets. Xmas Spirit Nurse deals 36,210 damage and has 5,486 DPS compared to Joyful Nurse Cat's 38,335 damage and 5,808 DPS. This means that Xmas Spirit Nurse has 94% the damage and DPS of Joyful Nurse Cat. Xmas Spirit Nurse also has 445 range compared to Joyful Nurse's 460. Lastly, Xmas Spirit Nurse has a speed of 9 while Joyful Nurse Cat has a speed of 12. Her slow and knockback rates are good enough to be useful against aliens, stopping aggressive pushers like Nimoy Boar and Star Pang from pushing too hard, but do mind if there are high-ranged enemies that are in the back. Against angels, her best target is Borifim, as you can keep this Boar variant stalled for a decent amount of time. For her Aku targeting, her lack of shield piercing means that for most Aku enemies, you would need to pair her with a shield piercer to make her crowd control work. However, she is pretty good against Aku Gori, who is notorious for being one of the most aggressive pushers in the game, and having reliable control against them will always be a welcome addition to most teams. Now for a seasonal variant with some rather minimal differences, we have Snow Angel Twin Stars, a variant of the Twin Stars of the Galaxy Gals set. The only differences include their targets, in which Snow Angel Twin Stars target floating and angel enemies, while base Twin Stars target alien and black enemies. Snow Angel Twin Stars have a speed of 27 and have a recharge of 66.2 seconds. On the other hand, base Twin Stars have a speed of 22 and a recharge speed of 71.2 seconds. Their faster speed means they can land their hits more easily, a good rusher against most floating and angel enemies, allowing her to leave a serious dent into their health pool. She works especially well against most angel enemies, as she could juggle enemies like Angelic Gori or pack a serious punch into Borifim's health pool. However, against an enemy like Sleipnir, you will probably only get a few hits most due to Sleipnir's knockback ability and Twin Star's rather low health pool. For floating, she can swarm most floating enemies as well and help quickly chip down the Bun Bun variants. While she may not be the best, she is still a pretty good rusher and can put serious dents into her target's health. Maeda Christmas Deluxe is a variant of Immortal Kaiji of the War God set. While base Kaiji only resists black enemies, Maeda DX resists both red and Aku. Immortal Kaiji has a higher base health of 98,600 health compared to Maeda Deluxe's having 81,600 health, which is only 82% the base health of Immortal Kaiji's. This means that against black enemies, Immortal Kaiji has 493,000 health, while Maeda Deluxe has 408,000 HP against red enemies and 326 health against Aku enemies. Also, since Maeda Deluxe has a TBA of 4.67 seconds with an attack frequency of 5 seconds compared to Immortal Kaiji's TBA of 3.33 seconds and attack frequency of 3.67 seconds, Maeda Deluxe only has 4,420 DPS compared to Immortal Kaiji's 6,027 DPS. This means that Maeda Deluxe has 73% the DPS of base Kaiji. Last is their range difference. Maeda Deluxe has a range of 300, while Immortal Kaiji has a range of 320. Kaiji Claws is a pretty decent tank against red and Aku enemies, though the increased TBA does hurt its ability to deal extra damage against its targets. The fact that Kaiji Claws has 300 range instead of 320 like his regular counterpart means he can't outrange Midnight D, who would be one of the biggest enemies you would only want to tank if needed. Because they still keep their wave immunity, they're a good option against Berserk Kori, Death Kori, and Toucan. However, his lack of shield piercing is something to note due to his somewhat long attack period, so a shield piercer is generally needed to help support his damage output against most Aku. A decent tank, especially for wave stages, but needs some support to help him with the offensive part, especially against Akus. For the last seasonal variant of the video, we have Reindeer Terun, who is a seasonal variant of Huntress Terun. They both not only have different targets, but also a different set of abilities. While Huntress Terun targets reds and aliens with a 100% chance to slow for 4.8 seconds, 20% chance to savage blow, and is freeze and weaken immune, Reindeer Terun is strong against aliens and blacks while having a 100% chance to knock them back while also being immune to slow. Reindeer to Run has a base health of 38,250, while Huntress to Run has a base health of 35,700. This gives Reindeer to Run 7% more health. In terms of damage, Reindeer to Run has a base damage of 22,950, while Huntress to Run deals 21,250 damage. This means that Reindeer to Run deals 8% more damage. In terms of DPS, Reindeer to Run has 4,026 DPS, while Huntress to Run has 3,728 DPS. Against non-alien or Black Colossus enemies, Reindeer to Run has 54,642 health and deals 36,720 damage and has 6,442 DPS. For Huntress to Run, her numbers against Colossus enemies are 51,000 health, 34,000 damage, and 5,964 DPS. Reindeer to Run against non-Colossus alien and black enemies has 95,625 health, deals 41,310 damage, and has 7,247 DPS. Against alien and black Colossus enemies, Reindeer to Run has 136,607 health, deals 66,096 damage, and has 11,595 DPS. Reindeer to Run's main gauntlet she deals with has been changed from Baron Seal to Super Hippo due to her not only getting strong, but also the black and alien targets along with a slight stat boost. However, due to the sheer damage output that comes from Super Hippo and Taki, you will need to invest in some levels for her to truly shine in this level. She really isn't doing much against Legrim, as she can only survive a single hit from Legrim at level 30. Against other non-Colossus alien or black enemies, her damage output and health are good enough, but the thing with the knockback ability against black enemies specifically is that in most situations, you will just get a natural knockback due to most black enemies having a high knockback count, though it is somewhat useful against Dark Otter if they're causing issues. However, since she also outranges Lenoir, you can use her to send this elephant back to the backline so it doesn't wipe out most of your units with a lower range. Against aliens, her knockback is more useful, as aliens don't have as much of a high knockback count compared to black enemies. While her stats aren't the highest in the world, her cheap cost and low cooldown allow her to be used in plenty of alien and black stages as extra backliner damage and is pretty easy to stack due to these factors. So, those were all of the current seasonal Ubers that exist in the Battle Cats and how they compare to their equivalent form, as well as a short form review of each of the seasonal units. The seasonal Ubers are definitely a mixed bag of units, from some being great to others being god-awful, but a lot of these don't have true forms yet, meaning that tons of them could be improved when they get a true form. If you enjoyed me sitting here listening to the differences between the seasonal Ubers and their regular counterparts, as well as giving a short review of each seasonal Uber, then make sure to give this video a like and subscribe to the channel, as this lets me know that this is the sort of content you guys want. Also, comment down below your favorite seasonal Uber, as I'm interested to hear your answers. Also, shout out to the following channel members: The Prodigy Rex, Vertigui, Not Skelly, Carlos Solitaros, Matthew Sumners, Spicy Milk, Bathu, Computer Scientist, Thomas Rask Jensen, Mario, Kevin Solis, Super Sniper, Yob Ibutoi, PlayStation 999, The Gaming Duck, Kieran Blaster, Alex HD Gamer 2 Pedraza, Northern Pike, The Nerd, Jeremy Johns, Wolfpack 1030, Duck Up, Osas Marinella, Naruto Uchiha, Tyler, and Shovel. If you want to receive a shout out at the end of these videos, then consider becoming a channel member, as this will also give you an exclusive role in my Discord server, for which you can find a link to in the description of this video. Anyways, I hope you have a wonderful day.